Imagine that someone that you love is screaming in your face, telling you that you're worthless. Or that same person that says that they love you is smashing your head into the wall and then throwing your body to the floor. All the while, your child cowers in the corner, screaming for it to stop. The Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence is a nonprofit organization in the Atlanta area that gives women and their children the aid to escape violent relationships. Like me, I'm sure many of you have either experienced, heard, or maybe witnessed domestic violence sometime in your life. And while you may not have lived it, many of you can empathize with someone that's battered and beaten and reaching out for help. Or maybe you have a maternal or a paternal instinct to protect a child from harm. While domestic violence is an issue nationwide, that does not mean that we have to tolerate it here in our city, or in some people's cases, their hometown. So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we need the Women's Resource Center, how they were created, and what they do. I'm also going to tell you how you can help. So first, let's talk about why they're needed. According to the CDC, 30% of women in Atlanta between the ages of 14 and 44 have been assaulted by an intimate partner at least once in their lifetime. And while, sadly to say, domestic violence tends to not be a one-time thing and soon becomes a habitual act. As reported in the Georgia Fatality Review, our state is ranked 10th for the rate that men kill women in domestic violence-related homicide. And while not all domestic violence ends in tragedy, it is still a very prevalent issue in our state. A study from the American Journal of the Community of Psychology, more than 50% of survivors stay with abusive partners because they believe that they cannot support themselves or their children on their own. So these women that are fearing for their children, and death is still a very high possibility if the abuse continues, they need help, they need a way out. And so while I've talked to you about why we need the Women's Resource Center, let me tell you a little bit about how they were created. Domestic violence itself encompasses everyone. It doesn't matter what your race is, your age, your religion, your ethnicity. None of that matters, your sexual orientation. It encompasses everyone. And in 1985, a woman fled to Atlanta to escape her abusive husband, and she was working with a lawyer for her protection, and that protection came too late. Her husband found her, shot her, and killed her in front of their 7-year-old child. In 1986, not even a year later, Commissioner Sherry Schulman founded the Women's Resource Center with $10,000 worth of funding from DeKalb County. Since then, the organization has grown to include halfway houses for women's protection and financial legal aid for them to get custody of their children from their abusive partners. The official website of the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence says that their mission is to create a society in which domestic violence no longer exists. So while I've told you how it was created, let me tell you a little bit more about what the Resource Center does. A study from the Industrial Psychiatric Journal said that even with a high prevalence of domestic violence, most cases go unreported. We need to make public awareness of domestic violence a priority. People need to know how to report domestic violence and the consequences of domestic violence, and that is something that the Resource Center does every day. They also have a 24-hour hotline for women to call and report domestic violence at any time. All calls are confidential and secure. They also provide support groups. Many people in abusive relationships feel isolated from their friends and their family. So this puts them in groups of women that are in similar situations for emotional support and in some instances financial help so that they can get what they need. I understand that it may seem difficult for many people to help somebody in a situation with domestic violence. And we talked about what they do, but let's talk about what you can do. In a situation so personal, it may seem difficult for you to help, but the Women's Resource Center has given us a couple of examples of how you can do so. First of all, ask, are you okay? That question can open a door to potentially life-saving information. Help them document their abuse and hide that information from their abuser to use at later dates. If you know a woman that's being abused, encourage them to seek professional help. And if you witness domestic violence, please, by all means, report it. So, Now we've talked about what they do, how they were created, why we need them, what you can do to help. That's all we've talked about today. I want you to think about this. This is your city. This is where you live. This is where you raise your children. This is where you work. These are your neighbors. These men and women, they're your neighbors. And it is your responsibility and your duty to help them if you can. We need the Women's Resource Center to end domestic violence to continue their work and help women and their families escape this carnage. And also think back about that woman that I described to you. What if she was your daughter, or your friend, or your sister, or your neighbor? Would you help her before it was too late? Don't let more lives end in tragedy. Don't let more children grow up without their mothers or their fathers. Domestic violence can be stopped, but only if you help.